triumphant grin stretched across my face as I slammed my laptop shut. "All right, class," I declared, my voice echoing in the cavernous lecture hall. "That's all for today. Enjoy your spring break and try not to forget everything I just crammed into your poor, overworked brains." A smattering of tired applause followed, a few groans sprinkled in for good measure. I couldn't blame them. My Introduction to Folklore and Mythology class wasn't exactly known for its high energy levels. Still, a wave of relief washed over me. Spring break, freedom, no more grading papers or fielding endless questions about the finer points of Norse mythology. Just me, a good book, or 10, and a week of glorious relaxation in my childhood cabin nestled deep in the woods outside my hometown of Harmony Falls. It wasn't much, but it was a world away from the sterile walls of the university and the never-ending demands of academia. The drive was uneventful, the familiar landscape blurring past my window. Harmony Falls hadn't changed much since I left for college a decade ago. The quaint shops lining Main Street, the white-steepled church perched on a hill overlooking the town square, it all felt comforting, a warm hug from a forgotten past. Reaching the outskirts of town, the pavement gave way to a dusty gravel road that snaked its way deeper into the woods. The canopy of trees grew thicker, their branches intertwining overhead, casting long, dappled shadows across the path. The cabin itself hadn't fared any better with the passage of time. The once vibrant red paint had faded to a dusty rose. The porch swing creaked mournfully in the gentle breeze. But despite the neglect, it still held the same charm, the same sense of peace I remembered from childhood summers spent exploring the surrounding woods with my dog, Scout, a goofy golden retriever who was no longer with me. A pang of loneliness hit me as I unloaded my car, the silence of the woods suddenly oppressive. Still, I pushed the feeling down. A week of solitude was exactly what I needed to recharge. The first few days were idyllic. I spent my mornings curled up on the porch swing, a book in one hand and a steaming mug of coffee in the other. Afternoons were dedicated to exploring the familiar trails, the scent of pine needles and damp earth filling my lungs, the crackle of flames a comforting lullaby as I devoured my latest literary adventure. But as the week wore on, a subtle unease began to creep in. It started with little things, an overturned trash can outside a neighbor's cabin, a stray dog barking hysterically in the dead of night. Then, the rumors started filtering in through the occasional phone call with my mom. "Did you hear about the Miller place?" she asked hesitantly, her voice laced with worry. The Millers were a family who lived a few miles down the road from my cabin. They kept mostly to themselves, but they were decent folks. "No, what happened?" "Well," she lowered her voice to a conspiratorial whisper, "they found Mrs. Miller this morning, down by the creek, mauled by something." Mauled? By what? Harmony Falls wasn't exactly teeming with wild animals. The biggest threat most folks faced was the occasional grumpy raccoon or a particularly determined squirrel. The news sent a shiver down my spine. The unease I'd been feeling solidified into a knot of fear in the pit of my stomach. I tried to brush it off, telling myself it was just a freak accident, a wild animal acting out of character. But a nagging suspicion wouldn't be silenced. The following night, the silence of the woods was shattered by a blood-curdling scream. It came from somewhere deeper in the woods, far from my cabin but close enough to send chills racing down my spine. My heart hammered against my ribs as I fumbled for my phone, the flashlight app the only weapon I had. Part of me wanted to run, to get back to the safety of civilization, but another, more stubborn part refused to give in to fear. Taking a deep breath, I crept out onto the porch, the darkness pressing in on me from all sides. The scream wasn't repeated, but the silence that followed was thick with a sense of dread. Armed with nothing more than a hefty flashlight and a rusty can of pepper spray, a relic from a forgotten self-defense class. I ventured deeper into the woods the next morning. The air hung heavy with a cloying metallic tang that sent a shiver down my spine. Following a barely discernible trail, I pushed through tangled undergrowth, my senses on high alert. The silence was broken only by the insistent chirping of crickets and the occasional snap of a twig underfoot. The deeper I went, the thicker the forest became, the sunlight struggling to penetrate the dense canopy of leaves overhead. An unsettling sense of being watched gnawed at me, the feeling prickling the hairs on the back of my neck. Then I saw it, a clearing bathed in an eerie greenish light filtering through the leaves. In the center, a gruesome tableau unfolded. The remains of a deer, picked clean to the bone, lay sprawled on the blood-stained grass. Dark, viscous stains smeared the surrounding foliage, a grim testament to the violence that had occurred here. My stomach lurched, and I fought back the urge to vomit. This wasn't a wild animal attack. The precision of the kill, the methodical removal of flesh, spoke of something far more sinister. Suddenly, a twig snapped behind me. I spun around, heart hammering in my chest, flashlight beam cutting through the dense foliage. But there was nothing there, only the endless wall of trees and the oppressive silence. Just as I began to breathe a sigh of relief, a guttural growl echoed through the clearing, sending a fresh wave of terror through me. The growl wasn't animalistic. It held a chilling intelligence, a malicious intent that sent shivers down my spine. Panic clawed at my throat. I didn't wait to see what emerged from the shadows. Turning on my heel, I sprinted back the way I came, the undergrowth tearing at my clothes, the sound of my own ragged breaths filling my ears. Back at the cabin, I slammed the door shut and bolted it with a trembling hand. The flimsy wooden barrier did little to ease my growing terror. I raced around the cabin, frantically securing every window, my mind conjuring horrific images of whatever lurked in the woods. As darkness fell, the silence outside pressed in on me like a physical entity. Every rustle of leaves, every creak of the old cabin sounded amplified, a potential harbinger of doom. Sleep, once again, was a distant dream. The following morning, the oppressive feeling hadn't lessened. I knew I couldn't stay holed up in the cabin forever. I needed to get help, to warn someone of the danger lurking in these woods. But the phone lines were dead, and venturing back into town seemed like a gamble I wasn't sure I was willing to take. Just as despair threatened to consume me, a glint of metal caught my eye through the dusty window pane. Half buried in the overgrown grass by the porch swing lay a glint of silver, a sheriff's badge. Hope surged through me, a lifeline thrown in the midst of despair. Maybe the rumors about the Millers had reached the authorities. Maybe someone was already looking for answers. With renewed determination, I grabbed the badge, a silent plea for help, and raced towards the road. My lungs burned as I sprinted down the dusty road, the sheriff's badge clutched tightly in my sweaty hand. Every rustle of leaves in the surrounding woods sounded like approaching footsteps, every snap of a twig a harbinger of danger. Yet, the thought of staying trapped in the cabin fueled my desperate dash towards town. The miles seemed to stretch endlessly, the afternoon sun filtering through the trees in long, menacing shadows. Just as doubt began to creep in, the familiar steeple of the Harmony Falls Church poked through the tree line, signaling salvation. Relief washed over me as I burst into the deserted main street. The shops were all shuttered, doors boarded up like frightened eyes. An unsettling silence hung in the air, broken only by the rhythmic creak of a rusty swinging sign. My heart plummeted. Where was everyone? Panic clawed at my throat. Had the danger from the woods spread to the town? Had whatever attacked the Millers and the deer taken the lives of my neighbors? Or was there another explanation for the deserted streets? Suddenly, a flicker of movement in the distance caught my eye. A figure, shrouded in a dark cloak, stood at the end of the street, silhouetted against the setting sun. Hope mingled with fear as I called out, my voice hoarse from exertion. "Hello? Is anyone there?" The figure remained motionless, a silent sentinel guarding the deserted town. Taking a deep breath, I approached cautiously, the sheriff's badge held out in front of me like a talisman. "I need to report a crime," I said, my voice trembling. "There's something dangerous in the woods, something that killed—" A guttural growl erupted from the figure, cutting me off mid-sentence. The sun dipped below the horizon, plunging the street into an inky darkness. Then the figure moved. It wasn't a human shape. It was tall and lean, with long, gangly limbs that seemed to defy natural proportions. Its head was shrouded in shadow, but two glowing red eyes pierced the darkness, burning with an unnatural intensity. A scream ripped from my throat, a primal cry of fear. Before I could turn and run, the creature lunged. The sheriff's badge clattered uselessly to the ground as darkness engulfed me. The world dissolved into a chaotic kaleidoscope of pain and fear. The last thing I saw were those glowing red eyes filled with a cold, predatory hunger.